So Eric DeCosta was on the Ravens Lounge podcast today, and he answered questions about potentially re-signing Patrick Queen. He answered questions about Deandre Hopkins rumors, if they were ever real during draft time. Were we ever thinking about drafting Will Levis or any other quarterback? And a lot more, so let's get into it.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan. This is another episode of the Flock Rundown, and today we're reacting to Eric DeCosta on the Ravens Lounge podcast. So he was asked about drafting Trenton Simpson, and does that affect re-signing Patrick Queen? I know he's already touched on some of those answers, but he dove a little deeper, and he actually said that he wants to re-sign Patrick Queen and that he declined the fifth-year option for financial reasons. So his quote was, the fifth-year option was something that was more based on business and the salary cap economics than actually Patrick Queen and his performance and what he does as a player. He's a difference maker for us. I think the fifth-year option was definitely financial reason, but by not picking that up, you're taking a risk of him leaving, so you already are kind of accepting that fact. If you couldn't afford to lose him, you'd have picked up the fifth-year option. We've seen that before. He's definitely not lying, but he's kind of throwing up a little bit of a smokescreen, which he talks about how much he loves smokescreens in the Lounge podcast. So I'm pretty sure that's kind of what that is. I'm sure he does love Patrick Queen. I love Patrick Queen. I think last year when Roquan got there, he was unbelievable. He is a perfect partner for Roquan. But is that worth a top market value contract? And I don't know if he'll even fetch that in the market, but if he has another year like he did last year, I would have to assume he's going to get paid really well. And I just don't think we're going to stick our neck out financially to pay him his top market value. So by not picking up the fifth-year option, if he has another successful season, I still think that he walks. Eric DeCosta said in the Lounge podcast that they'll be talking soon about possibly extending him. That's got to be the procedure with every player. Like, you want to extend anyone that you like at the right price. So I'm sure they'll have some conversations. But if Patrick's kind of betting on himself to get top market value for him, then I would assume those numbers are going to be a little bit below that. And my guess is he plays out this year, and then we let him test free agency to see what that is. And if he has another year like he did last year, he's going to get paid somewhere else, and we are going to lose him. I'd love Patrick Queen to stay. I am not a Patrick Queen hater. I think he's explosive. I think he runs to the ball. I think he grew a lot last year, and I think he'll continue to grow beside Roquan. He's going to learn a lot from Roquan, and there's not as much pressure on PQ to be that guy, you know? So I hope he does stay. I hope that they can work out an extension this year, and him and Roquan are the pair for the future. That would be absolutely incredible. I definitely want Patrick Queen to stay. My guess is that he's just going to bet on himself a little more and get quite a bit more money somewhere else. They asked Eric DeCosta about drafting Simpson and is he a replacement for Patrick Queen? And he said no, they were just drafting the best player available. And I believe that. I really do. I mean, it helps that he plays a position where we have a guy who could walk in free agency. But I do believe Simpson was just the best player available. And that's what we do. Shoot, I do that in Madden fantasy drafts or fantasy football drafts, right? Like, best player available is an incredible strategy because you always just want to bring the best players you can and then figure out positions and situations later, you know. If you can have a ton of talent on your team, you can usually kind of make it work. So I think Simpson is that case. He's the best player available, but also if Patrick Queen does walk, we have someone that can step in, so it doesn't hurt. Ryan Macon Garrett Downing also asked Eric DeCosta about the Deandre Hopkins rumors. And I was super curious about this because if you were tuned in on draft night or even like a few days before, and especially if you caught like wind of Pac-Man Jones and the Pac McAfee show and him saying his sources were saying that DeAndre Hopkins is going to the Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, and that there's a strong possibility that it's Baltimore, right? And I believed it. I fell for that. I really did fall for that. Like, as a lot of fans did, you know, any show I watched, anything I was reading, it was like, man, like, we're about to pull this off. We're about to get OBJ and D-Hop and probably trade our first round pick and potentially just move back into the second round with Arizona or however they work that out. But I thought that was coming. Like, rumors were swirling. So they asked Eric DeCosta about that, and he kind of went into saying he loves a good smokescreen and that he's been in this business for a long time. He can get word out to media members or analysts or whoever it may be to create a narrative so that it can kind of deter from what is actually going to happen, which is the Ravens drafting a wide receiver. So if he creates a narrative of the Ravens are going to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, well, now other teams may not want to leapfrog Baltimore because they're like, you know what? I think he's going to get DeAndre Hopkins. They're not going to draft a wide receiver. When in reality, we're looking at Zay Flowers or whoever else they had on their board. He made a good point to be very skeptical when you think you know what the Ravens are going to do, or any team for that matter. When there's word out ahead of time of what they're going to do during a draft or a player they're going to acquire, be skeptical of that because there's a lot of false narratives, and these teams can push these false narratives to further their own plans. So it's good strategy, and it makes a ton of sense. It's just a good lesson. We were never going to get DeAndre Hopkins, and no one got DeAndre Hopkins. He's still in Arizona, so we'll see what happens, but it seems like he's going to stay from everything you read, but what can you believe that you read anyway, right? Eric DeCosta was asked about the Jeremy Fowler report about considering Will Levis in this draft. He kind of beat around that question in a way, and he said considered is a word that can be used for anybody that's on the board. He admitted that there were quarterbacks on his board in the first round, and they considered any of those quarterbacks. But obviously with locking Lamar up, I don't see any way in hell that we were about to draft a quarterback at 22. He went into some cool things, too, about having a unique scouting department, a larger scouting department than most other teams. The scouts are kind of brought up in the organization, and they really understand what it means to play like a Raven, and he feels that that's an edge. Him and the scouts treat the draft as like their Super Bowl. That's their biggest moment of the year. They don't subscribe to any mock drafts. They just rely on the scouts that they're bringing up through the organization and kind of doing things a different way. I wonder if this goes back to when the Ravens organization shadowed the Warriors organization like a few years ago and kind of always wanted to be ahead of what was coming, you know, and then they drafted Lamar, and they're just doing things their own way and constantly reevaluating their system and tweaking it so that they can perfect it to the best of their ability and not following what the majority of other teams are doing. He mentioned that the Ravens, when they're interviewing players, ask very specific questions that are around emotional intelligence and self-awareness. He said they used to ask generic questions to every player, the same questions that a lot of the other teams do, just trying to find out facts about their life. But they said that over time you realize that that's not indicative of what kind of player or person you're really getting. Just because there's certain facts about their life, it adds to their story, and I'm sure it does tell you something about them. But if you can figure out what their emotional intelligence is and how self-aware they are, I think those are extremely important traits in life. I really do, especially self-awareness. If you can constantly reevaluate yourself, look yourself in the mirror, and make changes, you're going to become the best version of yourself. We should all be striving to do that. Just evaluating what we have going on. What kind of system, what kind of routine are you in? What kind of habits do you have? What kind of habits did you fall into? And don't beat yourself up if you are making mistakes or falling in those habits. Just be self-aware and then make those changes, you know? I think that's what they're looking for, and I love that. So just to wrap it up, I really enjoyed watching this interview on the Lounge Podcast. If you haven't seen it, just go check it out. It's on the Ravens page, and it's a good watch. I learned a lot, and, you know, once again, I just have a ton of respect for this organization. I'm proud to be a fan of this organization. I feel like they make really educated decisions, and they're competitive and just driven to win a Super Bowl and make all the best decisions possible to lead to that. And that's what we want as fans, right? We want to watch good football. We want to watch football at the highest level. We got a squad this year, guys. We got a real chance to be at the dance in February. So that's it for today. The NFL schedule comes out Thursday, so I'll have a video right after the schedule drops reacting to the schedule. So definitely look out for that. I can't wait for the schedule to come out. I would imagine we're maxed out in primetime games. But yeah, I can't wait. So I will see you guys on Thursday night, and I appreciate you watching these videos. I just started this YouTube channel. I'm just a fan wanting to talk Baltimore football. I'm going to be super active on here. I'm super active on Twitter. It's the Flock Rundown on Twitter as well. And once again, I'm Ryan. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown, and I do appreciate you guys. Have a great night, and I will see you Thursday.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.